This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Joining us again this morning. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you doing?
I'm well. How are you?
I am well. I'm well.
Good to see you. You seem to have 26 hours in your day.
I try to.
You try to.
I try to. Yes.
Well done on making that work. So we're getting into we're getting into a conversation, and really quickly, we want to take our proverb that comes in from Botswana this morning. The Botswana people say that essentially the best time, or rather, if you want to straighten a tree rather is straightened while it is still young. A tree is straightened while it is still young. Let's start with you, Prof.
Which is the same as you cannot teach an old dog new tricks.
New tricks.
Yeah, it's simply meaning that it is at the inception that you get things done. It's not when things are advanced. It applies generally to many situations. If you want to nip cancer, you nip when it is at the earliest stage. After that, you can't deal with it. Again, in the context of devolution, you're going to see if we allow certain traits to go on, they'll become the norm, and it'll be very difficult to get rid of them. I think that's why we get
essentially. Wanna kiss here?
Well, my understanding of that is that if you must fix something, fix it at the initial stage. Fix it when it's still tender. Fix it when it is still small. Don't wait until a guy is on the 7th floor and you think you can change the way the fellow thinks. Try and nurture that person, that child, at very, very early stages. So in the context of devolution, we are doing the 3rd cycle, and if we've not got it right, we shall never get it right.
There you go. Fix it at the beginning is essentially what we're looking at. All right, we're going to have a conversation into devolution this morning. Obviously, all roads led to Homa Bay, and everybody's there dancing up a storm, essentially. But then as that clears, the question is, what is left behind and how are we dealing with that? Those are conversations that we'll have. We want to take a quick nip to Homa Bay. Our reporter, Daniel Karaoke, is on the ground. We want to hear what's going on there this morning, even as we get into that conversation. And we'll just take a quick situation report from him and then see what is going on with that. Daniel, good morning.
Hi, thank you very much, and you have said it right. We are in Homa Bay County. This is the venue for the 9th Devolution Conference. The event is taking place at Homa Bay High School. And the event is expected, or rather the conference is expected to be officially opened by President William Ruto today, Wednesday. President Ruto arrived here in Homa Bay yesterday, Tuesday, and met with the various groups, among them women groups here in Homa Bay County. And today we expect that he is going to be officially opening this conference. It is the 12th year of the devolution since its inception after the 2010 Constitution. And it was a beehive of activities yesterday as various final touches could be seen here and there as preparation for this conference were going on. And today, as we expect the president to officially open, and also there are several issues that are going to be discussed. They are going to be having panel discussions, and today the theme for the day is good governance, and this being something that has for the last 2 years seen a lot of push from the civil societies as well as activists as they push for good governance. I remember last year we had demonstrations that were pushing for good governance, and also this year we've seen the same happening. And so I think that's the reason that has been given priority today in the panel discussions, and as they aim to have a good governance day in their discussions. And then tomorrow we are going to be having the former Prime Minister Raila Odinga, who is going to be giving a keynote address, and to tomorrow's discussion, or rather tomorrow they are going to be focusing on human rights and justice. This is also something else that has been of essence to Kenyans for the last 2 years, and major focus will be on that as human rights and justice tomorrow, as the Prime Minister, former Prime Minister, he will be making his keynote address, and they are going to mainstream on socio-economic, political, civil and cultural rights in their panel discussions tomorrow, when that discussion is going to be going on. And also they are going to be trying to reflect on the challenges that Kenyans have been undergoing on matters to do with human rights and justice. Remember, the government has been on the receiving end on matters to do with human rights, as that we have seen the activists pushing for government to take to respond on issues to do with human rights, because they say they have been ignored. Human rights have been ignored by the government. So that discussion will be held tomorrow, where the guest speaker is going to be the former Prime Minister Raila Odinga, who is also an ODM leader. Remember, it is coming at the backdrop of a lot of discussion to do with human rights, when you remember the statement by President William Ruto that police officers can shoot demonstrators, or rather those who are destroying properties, on their legs, and it generated a lot of discussion from the human rights activists. And so that topic tomorrow will be much delved into by the former Prime Minister, who has criticized the government of human rights information and human rights calls. And then on Fridays, when the conference is going to be officially closed by Deputy President Professor Kithure Kindiki, and that day they're going to be discussing about financing equity and inclusion. That's on Friday, as they aim to finance equity and inclusion to trigger candid conversations concerning the matters to do with allocation of resources. This is again something that has been major in the call by the governors to have resources allocated equally and in an equitable manner. So this again will be held, the panel discussion, or rather the discussions will be conducted on Friday, where the Deputy President is going to be officially closing this conference, the 9th Devolution conference that is taking place here in Homa Bay. Well, we'll be here to keep the viewer updated in all our subsequent bulletins, and of course, when the event officially is opened, we'll also keep the viewer updated. But for now, I want to hand it back to you in studio.
Thank you so much, Daniel Karaoke is our reporter there in Homa Bay, and looking at things as they start to rile up this morning, and then getting into, you heard the president will be there this morning, and former Prime Minister Raila Odinga then joins tomorrow, and then the Deputy President Kithure Kindiki will then join at a later time. But it seems that is where the focus and attention is, and not on the issues around devolution. Thanks again, Daniel, for that. We'll patch back in with you later and see how things are open up into discussions. Gentlemen, it is around this time that just about 2 years ago, the same former Prime Minister made a statement. It was at the Devolution conference that a statement was made directly to the former U.S. ambassador to Kenya, Meg Whitman, in terms of their involvement in Kenya's politics, and asked to stay out of things. And it seems that things have changed since then. But even as we look at what devolution is supposed to achieve, who the agents of devolution are, a quick statement from both of you as we get into this conversation. We'll start off with you, Bonakisia. Are we seeing that devolution has achieved what it was meant to achieve when it was envisioned in the Constitution 2010?
Thank you, Ndu. I think the question really should be whether devolution has actually achieved what we had set to achieve, given the new governing model of the counties, which were municipalities. You know, devolution, of course, if you look at Chapter 11, Article 174 and 175, 174 talks about the objects, why devolution. We were supposed to promote democratic principles and accountable ways of exercising power, to foster national unity, while recognizing diversity, exercising power, to ensure that we enhance participation of the people at the ground level, recognizing the rights of our communities, and so on and so forth. And then, of course, all that was principled on the basis of democratic practices and separation of power. So the devolved units were supposed to be independent of the center of the national government, but work independently. And then, of course, there were supposed to be checks and balances. So if you ask me whether those have been achieved, leave alone the plans that were set, the goals that were set by each and every county, have those been actualized? I would say to a large extent, no.
They've not been actualized.
They have not been actualized. If you look at the Constitution, what the Constitution had set for the counties to achieve or to deliver, and then when you look at what plans had been set by devolution cycle 1, because now we're on the third cycle. So if you look at from the third cycle, second cycle, and now on the third cycle, if you look at the resources that have been deployed at the counties vis-a-vis what has been achieved, I would say on a scale of 10, the achievement is 3.
That's interesting. The senator from Makwene County was here, and he said actually 30%. So it's around it's actually the same thing. That the outlook is that what was supposed to have been achieved by this time, 10 years plus 2 later, it should have been, much more. So 2 out of 3. I don't know what it looks like with you, Prof. 2 out of 3 say 30%.
Well, I would look at it differently, not because what Philip is saying is wrong, but because you get answers to the question you ask. That's the order of things. So if you ask the wrong question, you get answer that you can grade. Remember, Dennis, I was teaching one of the classes of philosophy, and then I set an exam, and I asked, critically assess the role of Prophet Hosea. And the young man had not read anything to do with Hosea. So he brilliantly wrote at the top of the page, far be it from me to criticize a prophet of God. I shall instead write about King David. Now, what was I supposed to grade?
You asked the question.
Yeah, because now, so in this case, I'm asking, do we as Kenyans understand what devolution was meant to do so that we can start grading it? Because each one of us is behaving like the proverbial bride, 5 bride men who touched the elephant at different pots. And each one of them described the elephant as what they touched.
Experience.
What part of the elephant they touched. Whether it's the leg, it's the tail, it's the belly, and so on. That's how they described it. So devolution was a very, very unique intervention at a time when our country was in a very, very bad way. We are talking about 2008. We've just come from a very vicious situation where we were actually teetering on the edge of a civil war, and whose future end we're not sure of. And therefore, when you look at it that way, then you ask, what is it that we had in mind? Because I remember I did the battles at every boardroom at that time. And the reason, and the boardrooms of political party, PNU, the political parties, ODM, we battled it out with William Ruto and the other side of the aisle. All the divides in the Republic, I remember us battling it out with the late Oren Timama over the same. So the problem at that time was ethnic consciousness. It was too deep, and it was dividing the nation. So the urgent agenda of the time was to unite a nation. That's it. And how do you unite a nation? By listening to the grievances of the people. The grievances of the people are centralization of power and resources is the one that is killing us. I remember one lady from Western Kenya who was teaching with me earlier saying that this time the tree must move with its fruits. saying, meaning the country was seen as a big tree that has fruit. So the tree is now in Mount Kenya. If it moves to Western Kenya, it must move with its fruits. If it moves to the coast, it must move with its fruits. And I thought that was a very interesting idiom. So, devolution came to reassert the unity of the nation, at the same time recognizing its diversity. And how do you do that? You add ideologies like Majimboism, because that was the dominant ideology of the time, where ethnic groups are conceived as armies that are battle armed. Armed, dressed for war, and therefore we needed to recognize ethnic communities, and that is in the Constitution, the diversity of the Republic. And how do you dramatize the diversity of the Republic? Through devolution. So let us never forget that was the main agenda of devolution. People are assessing, devolution as it is not delivering, it is too small for this, it is too this. That was not the original agenda. The second thing, and most important, was to bring development to the grassroots. Because the main problem we had that time is what we are calling the imperial presidency. And the imperial presidency would control the resources, and somebody would say that, siya sambaya mai sambaya. So if you drove from Nairobi to Rodwa, as I did, you would look at the areas which are government and which are not government. I would drive all the way from Nairobi to Nakuru. You get a lot of potholes along the way. Then you get a whole stretch with good tarmac. You enter Kitale, and you're going that way. The road is almost like a garden. So in short, the idea was to bring development from the grassroots. And that was the whole idea of sharing resources and pushing them down to the grassroots. Two, it was also to promote social justice. Social justice, whereby we are talking about inclusivity, and that's why we created the so-called equalization fund, which is 0.5% of our resources. And therefore, we need to conceive it as that. As one, it is supposed to bring unity to our country. Two, it is supposed to take development to the grassroots. And three, it is supposed to promote social justice.
Has it done those things?
I think to the best of my ability in terms of pushing resources to the grassroots, that it has, because it is by law that you have to push resources. And that has been the debate as to whether the central government or the national government is willing to push resources to the grassroots and to all the grassroots equitably.
But does it give it a choice? If we're saying that this has been enshrined in the country's most supreme law, that it's not a matter of whether they're ready to or whether they want to, that they're bound to.
That is the point. But you see, bound to does not mean that they are willing. Because there are always, when we talk about tariff barriers and other non-tariff barriers in the language of trade, you are talking about putting handles in the way of what is supposed to be done by law, but you are not doing it, right? So you put handles, and that's why what killed devolution in the 1960s, and that is what is harboring, devolution now. So when you say devolution is not working, the question is it not working because it's a bad system or was badly conceived, or is it not working because it's threatening the power that be? Because we are oscillating between those who think that Kenya is stronger when we are at an imperial presidency, and those who think that Kenya is stronger when the grassroots blossom like the proverbial 1,000 flowers. Yes, so these are the two angles.
But my question, Kisia, listening to this, because he's broken down the spirit, in not so many words, of why then we have devolution. But seems to me, because I was alive during the clamor to get this thing in place, and years later, it seems to me, when first we're dealing with the issue of ethnicity, that then led for us to say, look, let's put all our differences aside and let's decentralize government so that then each part of this country feels there's development getting to their regions. But it seems to me, years later, I I look at the issue of ethnicity and I'm wondering, are we backtracking? Are we going back to where we were coming from? And we didn't want to, and initially that's not where we wanted to go to. When we talk about development, then again it seems to me that we are almost courting, and we see a lot of governors courting themselves around the president, who is, in this conversation, the figurehead of the central government. And it almost feels like if you're not then aligned with the president or going to State House, the fruits that Prof was talking about with going with the tree, you will miss. You will miss having the tree and you'll miss the fruits. Because if you're not looking like you're aligning, development is not coming to your area. And case in point, this Devolution conference is being held in Homa Bay. Homa Bay has been the center of news lately because of a lot of, well, the good, the bad, and the ugly. But a lot of movement towards the western part of this country appears to be like that's where the fruits are going and that's where the tree is.
I think, Dennis, you've said it quite well. And if I've understood you, you're wondering whether there's actually a difference between the old system of governance and the new system. Now we call it new because it's what we currently have. So you're comparing the two. First of all, some of the things and the actions by our governors are taking us backwards. Because when we agreed to move forward and we said, and we allowed to have a devolved system, was to make sure that the counties were independent, but at the same time were able to interrelate, work together with the national government for the sake of not just national unity, but in promoting development and social justice. We were also supposed to have dealt with the issues of ethnicity. So if we have devolved on paper, both in terms of functionality and in terms of resources. And remember, resources, most of the times we confuse resources and limit resources to just money. Okay? There are other resources that have been devolved. For example, the county governments were, all the assets, machinery, were transferred to them. Land, buildings, those are resources, were transferred to them. Okay? All those things that were in the municipality councils or the cities were devolved to, or rather transferred to the national government. And therefore, you would have expected that the current system of governing our country and based on the county governments should be better than what we had before. Because you are independent in terms of the resources that you are collecting locally, that is money, and other resources that you're managing are yours, okay? Own source revenue. Then you have, by the Constitution determines what the counties should get from the national government. The national government collects taxes from the people of Kenya, and the sharing formula is also clearly defined. So there is nowhere, if you read the Constitution, where the governors and the president are supposed to be in bed. It's not a love affair. The work is cut out very clearly in the Constitution. The functions of the counties are spelled out in the Constitution, and the national government, which is headed by a president, has its own mandate. Therefore, on that score, Dennis, I think we have failed flat on our feet. We would have done better. And that's why the Constitution talks about, interrelations. You can relate. We live in one country. You cannot completely live independent or act independent of the other one. Okay? at least to some extent. Now, when you talk about, it was also supposed to have cured the issue of ethnicity. Okay? That although we recognize diversity, that Prof comes from Moranga. I'm born in Nairobi, okay? Raised in Nairobi, but I have my roots in Vihiga. I have actually moved to Trans Nzoia. That's where now I currently live. That's what I call home. So the boundaries of Kenya, although we recognize that the counties which are independent, but we are all under one territorial jurisdiction. So has it cured ethnicity? Dennis, it has not. In fact, I think it has made it worse. If you look at the auditor's report, Auditor General's report, it is so clear that you find a county that, all the jobs are actually taken up by the people who come from that particular county. Whereas the Constitution had foreseen a situation where I think is about 30 or 40% of those jobs being given to other people from other counties, so that we can promote national unity. But my biggest concern is not even that people from other regions have not been integrated properly into the county system. My biggest challenge, Dennis, to date, my biggest problem is that by the end of the third cycle of devolution, Dennis, we would have transferred as a country, as a nation, 5 trillion Kenya shillings by end of the third cycle, which is in 2027, in another 23 months. Now,
Transferred 5 trillion to the county.
Yes, since devolution, since 2013. Since 2013 to 2027, we would have transferred, would have given the counties almost 5 trillion Kenya shillings.
That projection is based on the fact that, let's assume we don't have the kind of debts that the national government is servicing.
You see, the Constitution is very clear. It talks about a percentage of the previous audited accounts.
Yes.
So whether we have debts or not, that should not be the
that shouldn't be the marker.
That should not be the problem of the counties. That should be dealt with by the national government. Okay, it is the national government that continues to incur debts on behalf of the Republic of Kenya. So they cannot say that we are heavily in debt, and therefore what is rightfully to be transferred to the counties cannot be transferred because of the debts. It's a percentage of the audited revenues of the previous financial year. Full stop. Debt or not debt, transfer the money. So once the money has been transferred, like the government has been transferring, but not adequately, not to what the Constitution has spelled out, what have the counties done without money? 5 trillion is a question Kenyans should be asking.
Okay, should we be able to see? I mean, let's just jump off that money, because it seems that we circle around it, isn't it? That if money were the drain, we keep circling around that. And that we talk about things happening whereby corruption then is what has been devolved. The use of money then becomes an issue. The movement of resources from central government to the counties. Should we not be able to see 5 trillion shillings around the country in terms of development if we're going by, number 1, unity, number 2, development, and number 3, social justice? The development, 5 trillion shillings is a quite hefty chunk of change. Would you not see that 5 trillion shillings would be seen around the country?
Thank you to Philip for that, because it minds work better when you have something to hold to. For example, you have a figure, 5 trillion, that has gone to the counties, that should have gone to the counties. Maybe has gone, and the big question is, if we're doing the audit for the years that we have had devolution, what would do for it? So this is where this whole idea about grading it only 30%, which is 3 out of 10, comes in, because you've not really gotten the worth of your money, given the much that has been spent. But again, I go back to the old argument that when it comes to development and resource and the question of resource, we are having a problem of conceptualization. And the problem of conceptualization is the dichotomy between resource mobilization and resource allocation. These are two diverse concepts. And the big question was, in the matrix of things, when devolution was conceived, was it meant to be receiving resources only, or was it also to generate resources? And I think what Philip has said, and I think that's really the take home for this particular forum for me, is that all the resources were devolved to the government. It's the counties that have lands. The central government doesn't have lands, except the lands that are now saying these are government lands. All the factories that were there were in existing counties. When you talk about water, it is in certain counties, and so on. So you can say, generally, that resources are in the hands of county governments. Not only that, developments that had already occurred in certain counties. In Mount Kenya region, we have 10 counties. We can only possibly count about 2 or so, which we'd call poor counties. Tharaka Nithi, possibly, because of the drought and so on. Maybe lower parts of Murang'a and Kiambu, the lower parts. When you look at a county like Kisumu, Homa Bay, and others, these are very wealthy counties in terms of resources. The same case with the entire of Western Kenya. Most of the Western Kenya, except maybe one part or here. So what was the point of devolution? The point of devolution was not to take the role of the Minister for Treasury or the Cabinet Secretary for Treasury, that yours is to receive and then distribute or put to use. Otherwise, why should we have had governors? What's the role of governors? Why couldn't we have representative of national governments in each county? Why go through the pain of electing Kangata in Murang'a or Natembea in Trans Nzoia? Why do we need them? If the role is to wait for Treasury to channel down resources and then they distribute. So I would be one who would be calling for the dissolution of the whole thing of the governor. And then we bring people who are financially trained to distribute resources to usable sectors.
So, sorry, Prof.
Yeah.
Essentially, what you're saying is that
the role of
governors are playing the role of a diversionary agent.
They are playing the role that they are not supposed to play. They are not to implement government funds in counties. That's not the point. Because William Ruto and his government can do that, because the Kibaki government did that, the Moi government did that, the Kenyatta government did that. So why were we to have this huge adventure and experiment into a governor? It is solely because, and this I'm saying as those who were in the boardroom when we were debating these issues about why do we need a governor? We needed a governor to generate resources. And therefore, that gives the base to the national government to tax. And also resources locally. I'm happy within our county. Kangata accounted for us, and I'm not trying to play the voice for him here. That since he came to power in Murang'a, he has raised 1.75 billion, which I think is very low, given the size and the wealth of that county. It's extremely low. But at least he has taken a step to say, since I came, this is what I have mobilized. That's Philip, is where we looked when we were conceiving the devolution and giving it all the resources, land, water, minerals, and everything, was to create a unit of development that generate, not a unit of distribution. As currently the country exists, counties are simply units of distribution of local resources. Are you therefore surprised that the ethnic politics that we are talking about is revolving about the role of counties as distributive units? rather than productive units of production. Counties need to be units of production. So in the whole Mount Kenya, which sits on a huge wealth, which has a history of development, we are now talking about 1 vote, 1 man, 1 shilling. I know this politically makes a lot of sense. And as a person with political ambition, it would be suicidal for me to say that 1 vote, 1 shilling, 1 this is not useful. But as a scholar, allow me to say that is not what we conceived the counties to be. When we give Mandela, we give Turkana and arid counties a lot of money. We conceived them as the weaker part of the country from an economic perspective. And we expected the governor of Mandera, the governor of Wajir, the governor of Garissa will put that money to use and begin exporting camel, goat, and cows to Middle East and other places.
Do you think,
yes,
Prof,
yes.
I mean, the things that you say,
Yeah.
sure, that's what was envisioned.
Yes.
But in the agents of devolution, which are the governors, deputy governors, do you
Yes.
think that this is in their mind? Because it looks as though they've taken on an administrative role. Let's make sure that, salaries are paid. Let's make sure that cess is collected.
Yeah.
Let's then make sure that the equitable share that then is, agreed upon by Senate and everybody else gets to us. Then we keep paying salaries month on month. This thing that you're talking about,
But it's the same
which
problem.
comes in own source revenue, maybe. This thing that you're talking about, ensuring that counties are working and operating in a surplus,
Yes.
I don't know if that's the
Look,
conversation
they
that's
should
going
be
to
the
happen.
board. That's why we came today, and that's what I have problem with the debate going to Homa Bay. It is about hot dogs and dogs. One is a very dangerous tuna, and the other one is a quick snack. Now, what we are having in Homa Bay is a quick snack. It's about inclusion, it's about social justice. But social justice based on what? Social justice is based on using the resources that you have and then using the resources from the central government to do core developments. That was how it was conceived. You do core developments. Now, but the problem we have is itself generic, and that's the issue, the question you are raising, whether there's a problem of conceptualization of the same. Because implementation of the constitution, of this constitution, required that there was massive civic education, very deliberate effort to get the Kenyans to know what this constitution is about. But have the two successful governments done that? The government of Uhuru Kenyatta and the government of William Ruto. They have not done that. Why? Because they were not the ones who gave birth to the constitution. So you have a child that you are bringing up a child that is not your child.
It's interesting, Kisia, what he's saying, and going back to the issue of revenue. Counties are entitled to equitable share of nationally raised revenue. This is in the Constitution. This is not a suggestion. It is there. The issue then of counties coming up with their finance bills and then seeking ways to raise their own revenue is equally there. Now, when we come to this equitable share, depending on the county, because there are counties in this country will say they are producing counties, and there are counties then will argue and say they are consuming counties. Now, each county is different in terms of how much they collect in terms of revenue. There's some that go as low as 10%. There's some that have a budget that exceeds what they collect. And each county seeks to remedy this by coming up with ways to collect revenue. Is it a fair assessment if we now go back to the letter and the spirit of the Constitution, talking about governors and this question of revenue, as the Prof is suggesting?
Well, Dennis, allow me first of all to very quickly comment on before I
Yes, go ahead.
Address the questions that you've raised. And I agree with Prof that when we conceptualize this new model of governance, we were not hoping that they would be turned into consumption units. We were hoping that they would be turned into some productive units. Okay? And when you talk about independence, you cannot be independent if you cannot feed yourself, if you cannot finance yourself. So we are on the third cycle of devolution. And most of these counties solely depend with the transfers from the national government. a big disaster. So there are two things there. One, that those units are not viable units. That's a fact. I'll not mention names because people will be waiting for me out there to lynch me. Most of them are not viable. If you are running such an entity in private sector, it would have been closed down yesterday or day before yesterday. Okay? Secondly, is the issue of the quality of leadership in those counties. Dennis, you are in private sector. Can you imagine a situation where a demagogue, a failure, a thief, corrupt, incompetent fellow is handed over a blue chip company to run?
To be disaster.
The smallest county in the Republic of Kenya since 2013, Dennis has received over 30 billion shillings in the last 12 years, over 30 billion from the national government. In private sector, that is a company that would be run by the best that you can find. But what are we doing to our counties? We have exposed our counties. You have Tom, Dick, and Harry running a county, which is an equivalent. In fact, it's a bigger than a blue chip company. In fact, about 10 or 15 or so of our counties are bigger, should be bigger than Safaricom. Bigger. If you look at the resources that they have, the resources they're able to generate. So if you look at the current and the potential. So the difference between the current and the potential is so wide, it's embarrassing. Okay? So then, of course, that leadership is coupled by extremely bad governance. Because we had hoped that those we put in power will exercise it in a fair manner, transparent, accountable, economical, to deliver services. Is that happening? That's not happening. Let me get back to the issues that you've raised about equitable revenue. You know, there are two forms of revenue streams from the national government. There are more, but let me talk about two. The first one is the transfer, direct transfer, that this is how much we have, this is how much we are sending to the counties, based on the factors that have been agreed and guided by the Constitution or the Act governing the county governments. Then there was a fund, and I think we still have it, that was supposed to equalize.
Equalization fund.
We took cognizance of the fact that there are some counties which are way below.
Yep.
So how do we equalize? How do we bring them to speed so that they look like other counties? Again, the question that one will be asking is that we are now on the 13th year, the third cycle of devolution. What have those counties, to what extent have those counties been equalized? I can tell you, it is shameful that most of them are even worse than they were 12, 13 years ago. So, is it fair? Is it fair that there are resources that are being rolled down from the national government to the county governments, and the Kenyans are not seeing what that revenue is doing? Is it really fair? The question is, it is absolutely not. In fact, there's no word to describe what we've asked. Okay? Because what has happened? What has happened over 13 years? Leave alone what they should be collecting, because they don't know what they're collecting goes to. In fact, I think it was a mistake. We need to change the formula so that we bring in some level of accountability, but also some level of effort. That those counties which make effort to collect revenue and spend it properly are rewarded. You cannot reward on the same strength. There are counties which are making effort to collect, to deploy those resources in a most efficient and effective manner. There are those counties which are doing nothing about it. Some are even collecting, but they are misapplying those resources. So that formula, if I was ever given an opportunity to correct what has happened in the last 12 years, that is one thing that I'll do. And how do you make sure that there's effort by the governors? But do you expect anything from most of those governors? No, because if they applied for a job in a blue chip company, they will not even be given
the job.
Messengeral. They will not even be considered for office clerks.
And interestingly, Prof and Kisia, the whole idea around what you've just said was to then cater to the marginalized parts of this country, which for many, many years were neglected. And so, looking at what the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission Chair, David Oginde, said about 9 governors currently who are under investigation for, among other things, corruption, the surprise here is the worst hit counties around this are those that are considered marginalized. They have been given privileges to try and bring the county up, but the leaders in those counties are siphoning that money and bringing it back to Nairobi to buy apartments and start businesses.
The problem is a generic one. It is at the level of implementation of the Constitution, where the national government did not put strict measures. I remember we had the transition of
Sugar and spice and everything else.
Spice up your
the other government you left, the Kibaki government left. And therefore, you had counties open checks where they signed in what they want. You are now talking about money. For example, when you go to Mandera or you go to Ajia or you are moving to Turkana, these are counties with massive resources that they are receiving from the central government. And when you go there, you go to some of those areas and look at what has been done with those billions. Almost my own county of Muranga, which is now complaining about true money, we have, I think, in the last 12 months, received about 540 billion, which is approximately $500 billion. This is for one county, which is complaining. Now, talk about the ones that are receiving massive resources. So that is one problem we are having, that the ones that are given are not doing what was envisaged in the original dream of the Constitution, which is basically to bring equalization to the country and to redress what are called historical injustices. That's one. Two, the counties that are not supposed to receive resources, like take, for example, Nairobi. What is the devolution? What money? Why would you give Nairobi money?
With all the economic activity,
yes, that's why you
are
fueled corruption. Because what would Kidero, what would Sakaja, what would Waitito and others have done with these massive resources, which is coming from the government, and you are raising so much fund? Look at the money that comes from parkings alone, just parking in Nairobi. Look at the levies. So Nairobi in itself is an economy that would be competing with, we talk about 48 units, which is 48 counties plus the national government. So Nairobi is competing with the 48 units, which is the government. On its own. Now, so these are things we need to address in terms of asking the fundamental question: should Nairobi be receiving money or should be generating money for the republic to bring the equalization in other places? And the same thing would be said of Mombasa, and the same thing would now we would increasingly begin to talk about Nakuru, Eldoret, and Kisumu.
And others. These perhaps are the questions that should be asked when a devolution conference such as the one that's happening in Homa Bay are actually taking place. These are the issues that should be looked into. Thank you for at least spurring on this conversation with us this morning. Our time comes up.
You'll allow me 1 second.
I'll allow you half a second.
Half a second. Prof is entitled to his own opinion, but I think Nairobi bears the weight of the entire nation. So, and I'll give a very quick example. When I was running the city a few years ago, there's a residential association which came to me and said, you know what, we pay rates. It's a lot of money, and we want you to do the entire estate, the roads. When we worked out the cost of doing those roads, it came to about 60 to 70 million shillings. When I worked out, because I sat down and said, okay, fair enough, we pay rates. How much? You have 100 units in that neighborhood. How much do you pay rates? It's 5 million shillings per year. So if I were to rely solely on the rates collected from that particular area, to redo the roads, I'll need more than 12 years. Thank you.
All right. Again, these are the things that we look at. And coming up to 4 minutes past 9 o'clock, thank you both for being here. Philip Kisia and Professor Peter Kagwanja, thank you for joining us. All eyes on Homa Bay, but all eyes on the real issues as well. Good morning.
This is the Situation Room.
In a fast-paced world, your shop